They came like a dare. 3 Russian MiG-31s roaring into the sky, confident in speed and altitude, convinced the rules of engagement would protect them. Inside their cockpits, the world looked simple. Instruments, horizon, a clear plan. They climbed to 45,000 feet, turned off their transponders, and steered a course that was both brazen and calibrated. A taunt meant to be noticed, not destroyed. They expected the usual, a polite NATO escort, a brief radio exchange, then a return to base with pride intact. What they did not expect was how quickly the script would be rewritten. On the ground at NATO's Combined Operations Center, the reaction was not panic, but calculation. The 3 blips on the scope were immediately tagged high priority. But the order that cut through the silence was deliberate and cold. Let them in. This was not indecision, it was strategy. Allow the intruders to enter the pocket, gather everything they reveal, and then close the net. What followed was a lesson in how modern warfare punishes arrogance, an operation where stealth, networking, and electronic mastery did all the killing without a single bullet fired. For the MiG crews, confidence swelled with every minute. They joked over the radio as they threaded the Gulf of Finland, mistaking NATO's measured response for timidity. Their onboard Zaslon M radars returned nothing but empty sky and civilian echoes. They had read the map, calculated the ceilings, and believed themselves untouchable. Speed, they thought, was invulnerability, but speed and height are only part of the equation. While the Russians scanned outwards, unseen eyes were scanning them in. Italian F-35s had slipped airborne from Amari, their radars whisper silent in low probability of intercept mode. Flying low and in electronic silence, they fed a steady stream of data into a network hungry for targets. Every maneuver, every signature, every heat plume was logged and shared. AWACS sat in the loop, processing and relaying. The MiGs were not alone. They were the prey, and the predators were already coordinating. Further west, 2 Swedish Gripen fighters took up positions. With their own radars off, they became extensions of a larger sensor grid, effectively borrowing the F-35's sight. These were not ordinary Gripens. They were elite, optimized to hunt the specific threats that had long shadowed NATO from the east. Armed with advanced electronic warfare suites and Raven ESA radars, they could turn an enemy's strength into its weakness. Their mission was simple and ruthless. Blind first, then strike. The command came like a scalpel. Engage. What began as routine escalation turned into an electronic coup. At first, the MiG cockpits displayed subtle anomalies, indistinct blips, odd interference, then communications turned to static. Then, with the suddenness of a slammed trap door, the radar warning receivers screamed. Systems that had been a pilot's lifeline now spat warnings in a language they didn't understand. For the first time that flight, the pilots were blind. Out of that blind moment, the Gripens climbed, their Meteor missiles hanging like cold promises beneath their wings. The Swedish fighters had not needed to close visually. Data had already placed them where they needed to be. The F-35s, having stripped the MiG signals and cataloged their electronic fingerprints, stepped into the light on the screens, completing the encirclement. The net snapped tight. A calm voice, clinical and public, broke through the emergency frequency. Russian aircraft, you are in NATO airspace. Your systems are under our control. Your radars are inoperative. Multiple missiles are locked on your position. Return to your airspace immediately. This was not a threat couched in diplomacy. It was an ultimatum delivered by technology and backed by a network that rendered traditional advantages obsolete. Pride and doctrine collided in those cockpits. The MiG-31 is a marvel of straight-line performance. Blistering speed, extreme ceiling, and a mission profile optimized for long-range interception. But its design is also its constraint. At cruising velocities near Mach 2.8, its turning radius is enormous. Attempting the abrupt maneuvers, modern dogfights demand risks structural failure or engine flameout. Against agile, networked opponents who do not need to match speed or altitude, raw velocity becomes predictability. Worse, velocity betrays heat. At high Mach numbers, friction and engine output illuminate an aircraft in the infrared spectrum. The MiG became a beacon, not a ghost. Modern electro-optical targeting systems and the latest guided missiles treat that heat plume like a neon sign. And when the enemy can feed those targeting feeds into an integrated battle network, a single missile launch is only the visible part of a far larger coordinated collapse of advantage. In minutes, the Russians lost more than position. They lost confidence. Ground control's terse instruction to turn back was a small mercy. Retreat is sometimes the only option left when survival trumps pride. The MiGs peeled away, making sharp, evasive turns that were more desperate than tactical. The Gripens tracked them until they crossed the boundary, while the F-35s shadowed them unseen, recording every panicked radio call and every unsteady flight parameter. No shots were fired, no wreckage littered the sky. Yet the humiliation was absolute. NATO had not merely defended its airspace, it had held up a mirror to a doctrine that had not kept pace with technology. The spectacle was not bloodless because it lacked casualties. It was bloodless because it exposed a strategic gap. The old calculus of speed, altitude, and raw power collapsed under the weight of networked awareness and electronic dominance. Back at home, the pilots carried more than debriefs. They carried the knowledge that their tactics were dated, their systems outpaced. In command rooms that night, diplomats and military chiefs argued and revised. What had been tolerable brinkmanship was suddenly untenable. The rules of engagement were rewritten not in rhetoric, but in capability. Deterrence became less about who could throw more metal into the sky and more about who could own the electromagnetic spectrum and the data that flowed across it. Technology had changed the nature of choice: confront and risk escalation, or withdraw and live to fight another day, but with a new understanding of vulnerability. The balance of power in the region shifted not by force of arms, but by the quiet efficiency of sensors, links, and missiles acting in concert. One networked engagement, measured in minutes, taught a lesson that no amount of training in isolation could. From that day on, the calculus altered. NATO's message was clear. Violations would no longer be answered with polite escorts. They would be met with integrated response, detection, denial, and, if necessary, destruction. The cost of provocation had been recalculated in real time, and the margin of safe posturing had narrowed to near zero. In the cold arithmetic of modern conflict, the most dangerous weapon is often the one that forces your opponent to rethink everything they assumed was true. The MiG-31s returned to base faster than they had left, carrying not trophies, but a new doctrine. Speed can save you from some threats, but in a networked sky, it will not save you from being seen, judged, and neutralized. The era of comfortable provocations had ended. The era of network deterrence had begun. Deterrence had